Hey there, I'm Richa and welcome to iBiologist. Today we are going to discuss an introduction of Mendelian genetics. Few studies from chemistry, biochemistry and biology we have come to know about the molecular and cellular process that generate and sustain human life. But long before we were knew that cells and molecules existed, we have able to understand the concept of heredity. Children look like their parents. Traits are passed on from generation to generation, be your hair color, skin tone, height or anything else. For most of human history, we have no idea how this happened, and even with the biology we have just learned, it still isn't entirely clear. But a discussion of how traits are passed along from one organism to the next, it's a discussion of genetics. In Mendel's time, it was thought that the heredity had to do with a blending of attributes, like the way two colors mix to give an intermediate color. But this do not account for a way that the traits can skip a generation. Thus, it seems to a Mendel. Mendel says that heredity must be based on discrete units of inheritance, which came to refers as gene. In the gene theory, each parent has a set of genes and these are retained intact. A human cell contains 46 chromosomes which contain the DNA that makes each cell unique. 23 chromosomes inherited with the fathers and 23 chromosomes inherited with mother. So we can say that each person made up from a combination of genetic code from both of their parents. Now sometimes we would like to say that we have 23 pairs of chromosome instead of saying that we have 46 total, because we have to remind ourselves that each chromosomes we have maternal and paternal copy. The first word I want to introduce is allele. Allele is the section next to the chromosome that codes for specific gene that makes you. Now humans have alleles 2 copies in each chromosomes. We can say that humans usually have 2 alleles for every specific gene, one from your father and one from your mother. So let's take an example and make sure we are talking about blood type. Now I'm sure you have heard about the blood types you usually named with letters like A, B and O. But what is that actually mean? Well, there is specific allele that codes for blood type, and let's say we have this guy here and his blood and his alleles are both codes for blood type A. And I tell you there is a girl is here who has one allele coding for A and another allele that code for blood type O. Now for the guy that both of the alleles that code for blood type A, it's pretty cool to check its actual blood type, it would be A. But for the girl, we are not sure as she has one of each. So I'm going to introduce the couple of new terms here. Since the guy has alleles that both codes for blood type A, it codes for the same thing. So we can say this guy homozygous. Homo means two alleles are same, homo means the same, and zygous means the mixture of DNA that he got from their parents. So someone who homozygous got the same allele from both of their parents. Now we are come to a girl if she is going to have a blood type A or blood type O. Well, it turns out that she is going to have blood type A, and let's that because the A allele is dominant allele and while the O allele is recessive. When the allele is dominant, that means someone has two different alleles, it will be the dominant one that wins. So in this case, since the A is dominant over O, which is recessive, A will win and show blood type A. Now, since it has two different alleles, it is called heterozygous. Since hetero means different and zygous is the same thing, we have seen the DNA mixture that you got from your parents. Now, I want to introduce two more terms. We can just grab a person's gene in two different ways. We can look at the person's individual alleles and it's called genotype. So for this guy, his genotype is AA, which is going to have two alleles, which is A and A. But we can also look at the person's physical traits, we call the phenotype. So for this guy, the phenotype will be a blood type A. You can see the phenotype and genotype are different, but it is possible for two different genotypes to make the same phenotype since someone is dominant over others. Now let's talk about the gene inheritance. So let's say that the guy and the girl that offsprings together. You can use something called Punnett square to determine what different genotypes their kids would have. Now each of the parents has two alleles on their separate chromosome. So each parent could contribute one or more allele to the child, and the Punnett square allows to determine all the possible combinations. So if you take the father's alleles and line up them up vertically and then take up the mother's allele and line them up horizontally, we can form the chart that defines the genotypes of offsprings. In this case, two of our boxes will have AA in them and two of them have O and A. So that means that is half of the children would have genotype AA and half of the children would have genotype AO. But since the both of the genotypes codes for the same phenotype, all of the children would have blood type A phenotype. Now let's see if you change the father's genotype to match up the mother's genotype. Consider both mother and father have same genotypes AO. Now only 1/4 of children who had the AA genotype, half who would have the AO genotype. Since the order you are written OA or AO, it doesn't matter. And 1/4 would have same OO genotype. So this means there is 75% of children would have A in their phenotype. Since AA and AO make the blood type A, but the 25% children would have the blood type O in phenotype since OO makes blood type O. So what we learn, the first we learn what are alleles and the homozygous and heterozygous, as well as the difference between dominant and recessive traits in relation to alleles. Second, we learn about the difference between genotypes and phenotypes. And the genotype refers to person's DNA and the phenotype refers to the physical trait that the DNA codes for. And finally, we learn about how we can use the Punnett square to determine how different alleles will be inherited from two parents.